Long before Rome ruled the Mediterranean, before Greece became the cradle of philosophy, and even before many of the world's greatest civilizations existed, there was Egypt. Its pyramids were already ancient when Cleopatra was born. Its kings ruled for generations before the first Olympic Games. For nearly 3,000 years, one civilization rose, collapsed, rebuilt itself, and endured while countless others disappeared into history. How did ancient Egypt become one of the greatest civilizations the world has ever known? And after surviving for 3 millennia, why did the age of the pharaohs finally come to an end? This is the entire history of ancient Egypt. Everything began with a river. Flowing through one of the harshest deserts on earth, the Nile transformed a narrow strip of land into a place where life could flourish. Every year, its floods covered the valley with fertile soil, allowing farming communities to grow where survival would have otherwise been impossible. As villages expanded along its banks, trade increased, cultures mixed, and powerful local rulers emerged. Gradually, 2 kingdoms formed. Upper Egypt stretched across the southern Nile Valley, while Lower Egypt controlled the rich northern delta where the river met the Mediterranean Sea. For centuries, these kingdoms competed for dominance. Then, around 3100 BC, everything changed. A ruler known today as Narmer, who is often identified with the legendary Menes, united Upper and Lower Egypt under a single crown. Although historians still debate whether Narmer and Menes were the same individual, this unification marked the birth of one of the world's first centralized states. For the first time, Egypt became a single kingdom ruled by a pharaoh, whose authority was both political and sacred. The king was no longer seen as merely a ruler. He was believed to maintain the balance between humanity, nature, and the gods themselves. This idea would shape Egyptian civilization for thousands of years. With the kingdom united, Egypt entered a period of remarkable stability. Farmers produced abundant harvests, officials organized taxation and labor, craftsmen perfected their skills, and architects began imagining monuments unlike anything the world had ever seen. One of those visionaries was Imhotep. Serving Pharaoh Djoser during the 3rd dynasty, Imhotep designed a revolutionary structure unlike any previous royal tomb. Instead of building a flat mastaba, he stacked several layers on top of one another, creating the step pyramid at Saqqara. It became the first monumental stone structure in human history. The step pyramid changed architecture forever, but it was only the beginning. Later pharaohs sought to surpass every achievement of their predecessors. Among them was Sneferu, whose ambitious building projects transformed pyramid construction through years of experimentation. His engineers refined techniques that would make an even greater monument possible. That monument would become the Great Pyramid of Giza. Built during the reign of Pharaoh Khufu, around 2600 BC, it stood nearly 147 meters tall and remained the tallest man-made structure on Earth for almost 4,000 years. Millions of limestone blocks, each weighing several tons, were transported, shaped, and assembled with astonishing precision. For generations, many believed enslaved people built the pyramids. Modern archaeological discoveries tell a more complex story. Evidence suggests that much of the labor came from organized, well-fed workforces made up of skilled laborers, craftsmen, and seasonal workers who supported one of the largest construction projects in human history. The Great Pyramid was far more than a royal tomb. It was a declaration, a symbol that Egypt possessed wealth, organization, engineering knowledge, and political power unmatched anywhere on Earth. As more pyramids rose across the landscape, Egypt entered what historians now call the Old Kingdom, an era of extraordinary prosperity. The pharaoh commanded vast resources. Priests performed elaborate rituals. Scribes recorded every harvest and tax. Trade expanded into distant lands, and the authority of the king seemed unshakable. For centuries, Egypt appeared unstoppable. But beneath the image of eternal stability, invisible cracks were beginning to form. Power gradually shifted away from the central government. Regional governors became increasingly independent. The enormous cost of maintaining monuments and royal institutions placed growing pressure on the kingdom, while periods of reduced Nile flooding likely brought food shortages to parts of the population. The system that had created one of history's greatest civilizations slowly began to weaken. Eventually, the Old Kingdom collapsed. For the first time, the civilization that had built the pyramids faced political fragmentation, instability, and uncertainty. Many kingdoms would have disappeared forever after such a catastrophe. Egypt did not. Its greatest transformation was only beginning. But Egypt refused to disappear. Out of the chaos, determined rulers reunited the kingdom and restored order along the Nile. This new era, known as the Middle Kingdom, rebuilt the authority of the pharaoh, strengthened the economy, expanded irrigation, and reopened trade routes that connected Egypt to distant lands. For a time, prosperity returned. Yet history rarely allows powerful civilizations to remain unchallenged. Around the 17th century BC, a foreign people known as the Hyksos gained control of northern Egypt. They introduced technologies that the Egyptians had never fully mastered before, including the horse-drawn chariot and more advanced composite bows. For more than a century, Egypt lived under foreign rule. But instead of accepting defeat, Egyptian leaders studied their enemies, adopted their military innovations, and prepared for the day they would reclaim their kingdom. When that moment finally came, everything changed. The Hyksos were driven out, and Egypt entered the New Kingdom, the most powerful period in its long history. No longer satisfied with defending its borders, Egypt became an empire. Its armies marched deep into Nubia and the Levant. Gold, tribute, and exotic goods flowed into the kingdom, while magnificent temples rose across the landscape to celebrate the victories of its rulers. Among those rulers was Hatshepsut, one of the few women to reign as pharaoh. Rather than pursuing constant warfare, she strengthened Egypt through ambitious building projects and successful trading expeditions that filled the royal treasury. After her came Thutmose III, often called the Napoleon of ancient Egypt. Through a series of military campaigns, he expanded Egyptian influence farther than ever before, creating an empire that stretched across much of the ancient Near East. At its height, Egypt appeared stronger than ever. Then came one of the most extraordinary moments in its history. Pharaoh Akhenaten abandoned the traditional gods and elevated the worship of Aten above all others. He built a new capital, reshaped royal art, and challenged religious traditions that had endured for centuries. His revolution transformed the kingdom almost overnight, but it did not last. After his death, the old religious order quickly returned. His young successor, Tutankhamun, restored the traditional gods and moved the royal court back to its former centers of power. Although Tutankhamun became one of the world's most famous pharaohs after the discovery of his nearly intact tomb in 1922, his historical importance lies less in conquest and more in symbolizing Egypt's return to stability after a period of dramatic change. Soon, another ruler would define Egypt's image for generations. Ramesses II ruled for more than 6 decades, constructing colossal temples, enormous statues,
and monuments that still dominate the Egyptian landscape today. His reign projected an image of unmatched strength and prosperity, while his famous confrontation with the Hittites at the Battle of Kadesh ended with one of the earliest known peace treaties in recorded history. To later generations, Ramesses became the very image of a pharaoh. But beneath the monumental architecture and royal propaganda, new dangers were emerging. Successive rulers struggled to maintain the empire. Economic pressures increased. Powerful priests gained influence. Invasions from groups now known collectively as the Sea Peoples shook the eastern Mediterranean, while Egypt gradually lost control of its distant territories. The empire that had once dominated the region slowly contracted. Over the centuries that followed, foreign powers increasingly shaped Egypt's destiny. Nubian kings ruled as pharaohs. The Assyrians invaded. The Persians conquered the kingdom. Although Egyptian culture survived, political independence became increasingly fragile. Then, in 332 BC, a young Macedonian king entered Egypt without facing significant resistance. His name was Alexander the Great. Alexander was welcomed as a liberator and founded the city of Alexandria, which would become one of the greatest centers of learning in the ancient world. After his death, one of his generals established the Ptolemaic dynasty, a Greek royal family that ruled Egypt for nearly 3 centuries while adopting many of its ancient traditions. The last ruler of that dynasty would become its most famous, Cleopatra VII. Highly educated, politically skilled, and determined to preserve her kingdom's independence, Cleopatra formed alliances with Julius Caesar and later Mark Antony as Rome's internal struggles reshaped the Mediterranean world. But after Antony and Cleopatra were defeated by Octavian at the Battle of Actium, the fate of Egypt was sealed. In 30 BC, Cleopatra died, and Egypt became a province of the Roman Empire. The age of the pharaohs had come to an end. Yet Egypt itself did not vanish.
Its temples continued to inspire travelers for centuries. Its architects transformed the possibilities of monumental construction. Its scribes preserved one of humanity's earliest writing systems. Its religious beliefs influenced neighboring cultures. Its scientific knowledge, engineering, and artistic achievements echoed across the ancient world and far beyond. Today, the pyramids still rise above the desert, the temples still stand along the Nile, and the names of its greatest rulers remain recognized across the globe. Empires conquered Egypt. Kings replaced kings. Dynasties disappeared. But few civilizations have left a legacy as enduring as the one that began beside a single river more than 5,000 years ago. Ancient Egypt did not survive for 3,000 years because it never changed. It survived because, generation after generation, it found new ways to endure. And that is why its story still fascinates the world today.